call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones, and in this one, let's go ahead and add two more figures to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at Batman Beyond 2.0, the 2-pack, but more specifically, we will be taking a look mainly at Justice Lord Superman. Now, this is because don't really have a big interest in the Batman Beyond 2.0 figure. I do have it up here. He has a pretty nice color scheme, alternate to the ones we have received before. But basically, this just didn't really interest me that much. So I will be concentrating on the Justice Lord Superman, which I actually really had a big interest of taking a look at. Now, these guys do come packaged in a big 2-pack from McFarlane with a really nice assortment of accessories. Now, they do look pretty futuristic in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at them. But first, they both do come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. Now, each one does come with a data file card. On the Justice Lord card, you do have some source material from the comics. Pretty interesting. Now, I always have been a big fan of the sort of lore of the Justice Lords. I think pretty much from Justice League Unlimited, they made an appearance. We did receive that animated version, but that really didn't look anything like the one from the animated series. So, although I do own that one, not really one of my favorite figures. Now, in the back, you do have a cool read up on Justice Lord Superman. Pretty awesome. Now, we will hold on to this. Now, the Batman Beyond one also comes with a card, but really nothing interesting to speak of. So we'll just add that to the collection. Now, the Justice Lord Superman does come with some alternate hands. Now, of course, we've seen these hands before, and these are skin-toned hands, but they are some pretty gnarly looking hands. These are fun for posing and figure photography, but the thing about them is they're a little bit large, but honestly, it kind of does work with this Justice Lord, especially after a little bit of alterations. So we'll hold on to these. Now, the Batman Beyond also does come with some accessories, which are alt hands. Now, I actually love the sort of clawed hands that he comes with. So all of my Batman Beyonds are actually displayed with these hands. The other ones are just sort of some gripping hands in black. And he does come with some pretty unique batarangs. We haven't seen these before. I'm not sure like where they come from or what they're stylized as, but we'll add them to the Batman armory. Not a problem. And as I said before, not too interested in this figure. I will be adding him up on the shelf next to the other versions of Batman Beyond, but I was really excited actually to take a look at the Justice Lord. Now, I love this whole color scheme, the black and white, and then with the red accent really makes this figure stand out compared to other versions of Superman. Now, I can honestly say that this figure is way more interesting than the Eradicator that we got. Of course, people are waiting for your uh, standard Eradicator release. That one wasn't really what people were expecting, but I'm sure we should probably end up getting that classic original Eradicator in the future. Speaking of which, of course, same body book, same cape from the Eradicator, just with a different color scheme and, of course, a different head sculpt. This one portrays the Justice Lord as like an older Superman from an alternate future, so that's pretty awesome. like I said, always been a big fan of these designs. I really wish that McFarlane would tackle the Superman Beyond, which is one of my favorite costume designs for Superman. Was a big fan of him when he was featured in the Batman Beyond cartoon. So here's crossing our fingers, hoping that eventually McFarlane tackles the Superman Beyond. But for right now, this is actually quenching my thirst for some black and white scheme Superman, older version, more battle tested version of Superman. First impressions, I gotta say that they kind of almost got it right with this one. I mean, like I always say, if you're just a regular collector or a regular consumer, you're not really going to notice all the little details, or you're just going to open this up and think, wow, this is a pretty evil looking Superman. And that's, the main deal is to sell to that large amount of people that don't really know, the intricacies of the lores and the details of the costumes. And us as collectors, we back the line. We make a lot of the revenue for McFarlane, and it does, kind of irk us when the little details are messed up or when McFarlane goes cheap a little bit. But I mean, of course, we learn to live with it. I mean, I know I do. Really happy to have this figure, besides, the things I don't like about it. But one thing I really like is the S on the chest looks really clean. And although the cape, like I said, is a reuse from the Eradicator, it still looks awesome with this figure. Now, one thing I definitely like is the head sculpt. Now, I'm kind of close to saying that this head sits a little bit low. I mean, it's right on the line. It's not so bad like some other figures that the head's real low, but it is a smidgen low, so I may tackle that when I do my custom of this figure, which we will be taking a look at all the changes that I made and the little details that I added, to elevate them to that next level. But like I said, just for a regular Justice Lord Superman, I mean, it will pass the regular test of, of someone that's not a big aficionado. But of course, for me and for many of you, the little details are, what we hope that McFarlane would actually look at. So moving down from, the cape, the symbol, the first glaring thing that is really bad is on the trunks. They actually did the shape of the belt in just a painted form. They didn't, sculpt it out or add any little details. Now, here's the thing. I'm kind of fine with the white trim around the top, but what really is bad for me is the the little circle. It just looks so cheap and so I don't want to say, but like legend-esque, that they just paint on the details. They don't like actually add a little sculpted detail. Now, I did fix this myself, so we will take a look at that. But that was one of the first glaring things that I didn't really like. Now, look at the hands. Now, we'll have the two fists on him. But of course, if you see a lot of images of the Justice Lord, I mean, I'd have to say 99% or 98%, he always has gloves. He never has bare hands. So for me, being a big fan, that was like one of the first things I saw in the promo pictures and all of that. But I knew that I would be able to, fix it for myself. Now, that's usually how I am. I don't know how you guys are, but when I see figures revealed, right away my gears start turning, and I start thinking of things that I may end up having to custom or fix for myself. Prime example is like Animal Man, and although I do have that little bit of fear that eventually McFarlane is going to release an Animal Man with the coat, I already have plans to make a custom jacket for him. So I'm just, waiting for that figure to be released. Now, there's another couple of things like the knee joints and the elbow joints are a matte black, so they have absolutely no shine to them, while the rest of the costume is more of a glossy black. Now, I do have a simple trick that I will show you guys when you want to match these kinds of plastics, and it's not hard at all, and it doesn't take, that much skill, but it does match the plastics a little bit better when you just have that difference between matte and gloss plastic. And then now the biggest the biggest faux pas that McFarlane did on this figure, which everybody saw right away, and that was the painted lines that he did. Now if you look at the forearms, it has the same sculpted detail that all the infected figures have. You have that sort of edge of the costume at the wrist. Now the second line, they just painted it on, which that's fine for up here, but at the boots, they actually just painted on both lines. And the reason that's not cool, a really bad decision from McFarlane, is that you can actually see the old sculpt of the Superman, the traditional Superman boots, and the line is just painted on there, which McFarlane has done a couple of times. So, I mean, I don't know how we could fix this, or if anybody has the ability to bring it up to McFarlane. But I think the main thing we need to understand is also price point. So I know to get a different boot sculpted out differently would be a lot of money, but there is certain ways you could go around that. And I actually did that on my own when I custom this one. So I will show you guys how I actually, fixed it for myself. Now it's not perfect, but it works a lot better than the way McFarlane executed it. Now, another thing I wanted to do was, I feel like this guy should be really statuesque, tall. He has that attitude, that evilness, pumping out of him. And I just felt like he should be a little bit taller. So per usual, I knew that if I do the thigh lift to the thighs, it will lift them up at the hip joint. But also when I raise up the head that little bit, that'll also give him some height. So I I had all these plans in my mind of how I wanted to customize him, and now I will show you guys what I did. Now, first thing I did is I did pop off the head, and I found actually another peg that was a slight millimeter longer or taller than the original peg. So I switched that out, and I knew it would raise up his head just a little bit more, so it wasn't so crunched down, on his neck. But one thing, I don't know why I did this, but I wanted the white paint to go all the way up, like the whole neck. Now, I knew this would be sort of a difficult task, but of course I was up for it. So took them all apart, taped off the neck from, the rest of the body, and I sprayed it with some of that new paint that I'm using, that Tamaya paint, and it left a really nice white in a single coat. So that's a real cool trick if you need to just spray something. I also used white paint, like acrylic, but I did that after, once I had sprayed it and it had dried, just to like touch in some of the deep parts of it and add a little bit of contrast of whites. Once that dried, I did seal it because I knew once I put the head on, it would be rubbing, and I didn't want it to rub off any paint. Now, once I put the head back on, it actually did help a little bit to raise up the head. But what really looks cool is the paint that is going all the way up underneath the whole jawline. I don't know why. For me, it just looks really awesome. I just really like the way it looks. And I know this is kind of wrong because in most of the images, they do show it like just sort of like a mock neck right up here. But I don't know why. I just wanted it to go all the way up, and it does look really good. So I was really happy with the way that came out. All these little changes that I do just make me fall more in love with the figure. It's sort of like the Supergirl, when I got her, I was like, ugh. But once I changed her up and did my, little customizing, she became one of my favorite figures. Now, once I did have the head on, I actually wanted to touch up the paint for the head sculpt. Now I added some white to the gray on the temples because it was pretty much just a gray color, but I just wanted to add that accent of white on either side. I added some blue highlights to the hair, And as you can see, it makes it, pop a little bit more, have a little bit more life to the hair. And then I went back and I added dark, sort of brownish, wash to the cheeks and to the chin, just to really bring out the lines and the details of the head sculpt. And it actually looks a lot better, catches the light a lot better. And I added a little dot of white right at the heat vision eyes, right in the middle, just a speck of white, just to give it a little bit more flair, or like when the light hits it, that little white dot really catches in the, gleam of the light. So really happy with how the head sculpt, the repaint came out. Looks awesome. So let's go ahead and move down. Now, I did want to tackle the hands because how I said, usually he has gloves. He doesn't have bare hands. And the way I did this is I actually took the hands that he came with, but what I did was I added sealer Mod Podge right to the fingers. And what this actually does is when you let it dry, it covers the fingernail print. So although the hands have the sculpt of the fingernail, when you put that little, coat of sealer, it covers that and it makes it look more like just gloves. So once I did that, I switched out the wrist ball joints for some black ones because of course these were flesh. And of course I painted them with a satin black and then sealed them. Now, I not only sealed them to protect them from, touching them and moving them around, but I also sealed it to give it that gloss to match the rest of the costume. So it wouldn't look so dull compared to the rest of the blacks that are on this figure. And it actually came out awesome. Now you can switch out the hands. Here are actually the hands that I painted for him and put him in some cool poses. And to me, he just looks a lot more accurate with the black gloved hands. And these are, of course, custom by me so that they look more like gloves than just hands with paint on them. So really happy with the way that came out. So far, we're doing work to make this guy awesome. Now, the next thing I did is I did want to add a little circle to the middle of the belt area. As I said before, that was pretty bad, like to just print a circle on there. Now, surprisingly enough, I was going to use some other Superman trunks that I have for a future custom that I'll show you guys later. But I didn't want it to have the circle. I wanted to have like a square buckle. So I sliced off that circle because I wasn't going to need it. And I knew that I could use it on this figure. So I kept it. Once this figure came in, once I started doing the custom work on him, I went ahead and took out that little round buckle, belt buckle. And of course, I sprayed it white, let it dry, gave it a little bit of touch up with white paint, with white acrylic paint, and then I sealed it and then I glued it. Now, whenever you do something like this is a tip from me. Don't ever paint the part that you're going to glue. So when I did paint this buckle, I just painted the front of it. I didn't paint the back. I left it the way it was when I sliced it, to separate it from the trunks. But that way the glue has a good chance to adhere plastic to plastic. It doesn't adhere plastic to glue because then it probably won't glue on. So once I, centered it, glued it on, and like I said, I knew this would work. The other lines don't really bother me. What it was just that buckle. So now it has some shape to it. It has some form to it. And it really, makes the figure instead of just having that printed on, oval that it had on. So really happy the way that came out. Of course, I did the thigh lift with the hip joint to make him taller. So now with the head raise and with the thigh raise, he's, a little bit taller. In fact, let's bring out, I did want to bring out the Rebirth Flash because a lot of people used to say this figure was like one of the taller figures. And now with the mods I made to this Superman, you can see how he towers over this Rebirth Flash, which looks really good because he should be an intimidating force, have some stature to him. So that worked out really well. Now, finally, to finish it off, this is what I did with that top trim of white. Now, in my mind, what I wanted to do was the way the wrist has that like elevated, sculpted out part of the costume at the wrist. I wanted to do the same thing with this upper line. So I would be leaving the other painted design flat, like the way the forearms are. The lower one here on the boots would stay the same, but I wanted that top one to have that sculpted detail like the wrist does. So glued it on pretty much around where it was painted white at, and then had to touch up the paint, had to go back and touch up the black where I messed up. But once I did all of that, I did get it to look clean, clean where it looks like it was actually made like this, where you don't have it all blotchy. So it looks a lot better now. It's not perfect to me, but it looks way better than that painted line did. And actually now when you get them, in some poses, like, floating in the air, he looks awesome. Now, easily you could pop off the hand, pop on the other sort of gesturing evil hand, and that gives you some cool Superman Lord, Justice Lord Superman action. Looks really nice. Now, as I said, guys, I do this because I want to show you guys the potential that these figures could have. Of course, nothing's ever going to be perfect. People could argue with me like, oh, you do that because McFarlane sucks and you have to fix the figures. But I already have my answer for that. And that is that I've seen people mod Marvel Legends. I've seen people repaint Marvel Legends. I've seen people repaint $100 figures, and this is no different. I'm just doing this because I want to lift this figure up, take it to its full potential. And I'm sure someone that paints a Mafex Batman is doing the same thing. So I'm really happy with him. The one thing I will say that is a negative, of course, is the cape, because you could you could basically only have him like turned this way and having that menacing pose. But I'm fine with it. Like it's fine. Add him to the collection. Of course, if you wanted to, you could swap out this cape and put a cloth cape or just a static cape, and that'll open up the possibilities of putting them in different poses. But for me, he's fine like this. I actually like him with that side gesture, and he's gonna look awesome up on the shelf with the rest of my DC Multiverse collection. But anyways, you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.